It means the word of the days or the word of the events. And generally, in the Hebrew titles are always taken from the first word in the book, in the Hebrew book. In this one, though, it's taken from chapter 27. In the Septuagint, the title is "The Things Omitted" or "The Things Passed Over." So if you ever pick up a Septuagint, you'll see that's got a different title. And it's a reference to the things that are omitted or passed over in Samuel and Kings. The English title comes from Jerome, the translator, the guy who did the Vulgate back in the 4th or 5th century. And he suggested that it be called Chronicles because that's what was happening, the chronicling things. But he didn't use that in the Vulgate. But then later on, Luther picked up this comment, and Luther got on the idea of using Chronicles. So from that point on, the post-Reformation translation, it's been Chronicles.
What is it called in the Vulgate?
Things passed over, things omitted.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
he took the same thing out of the Septuagint.
Okay.
Okay, the author is probably Ezra. It's the same style apparently as Ezra. And in the genealogy in chapter 3 of 1 Chronicles, let's go to that. 1 Chronicles chapter 3 verse 17. And from verse 17 to the end of the chapter, it talks about the line after the exile. And it mentions Zerubbabel. And then it lists the sons of Zerubbabel. And there are 6 of them. So if you allow 20 years for a generation, then those 6 sons would be 120 years, or 6 sons in line, 120 years. It'll bring it down around 450 BC, which was about the time of Ezra. Remember, they went into captivity at 586. So then you take 120 years, subtract that from that, it'll bring you down to about the 460s. Which is,
I don't understand how you're adding for each son.
20 years for each son in succession. They're not the same son.
Okay, it's a
Each
son of a
generation,
son of a
son of a son of a son of a
Thank
son.
you for
I'm
asking.
sorry.
I thought I was
Yeah.
a little dumb.
Yeah, son of a son of a son of a son.
Oh, I see. All the way to the end.
All the way in the end. Yeah, it would be Zerubbabel, and then it would be Hananiah. Is that it? Yeah. Hananiah, and then Shekinah, and whatever else. Shechaniah, and all of those. Okay. Now, we'll get to that later. Then other scholarship suggests that it's just unknown. We don't really know who the author is. But it seems plausible that it's Ezra. That it's post-exilic, and after some things have gone on. It might be, in all likelihood, the very last writing during the Old Testament history period. Because it's probably after Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi have ministered, and nothing's happened. There hasn't been this return of Messiah or whatever, and so they're probably losing hope. And so now the chronicler starts putting together this information because he's going to be trying to answer certain questions. The last dated event in the chronicle is in chapter 36, verses 22 and 23, where it talks about Cyrus coming into power and giving the decree for the exiles to go back home.
What's the year that Isaiah's writing about Cyrus?
Oh, Isaiah's writing probably in 600 or 700 BC. So he's writing hundreds of years before when he prophesies Cyrus's name. Yeah. The earliest manuscript we have that has the Chronicles is a manuscript from the Septuagint in the mid-2nd century BC. So that's how far back it goes. And then just in terms of the history covered by Chronicles, it covers more history than any of the other Old Testament books because it goes back to Adam all the way up to the return. Okay, and it could be that whoever the chronicler was, the first thing he does is he writes 1 Chronicles 10 through 2 Chronicles 34 in terms of just the history, and then probably later on appends the genealogy to trace it all the way back, show them their line. Prepends, yeah. And then chapters 34 and 35 later, or 36 rather, later. Okay, sources. Let's just look at some passages. 1 Chronicles chapter 4, verse 33. Talking about towns. Their surrounding villages were Etam, Ain, Rimmon, Takan, Ashed, 5 towns, and all the villages around these towns as far as Baalath. These were their settlements, and they kept a genealogical record. And so these are the references: chapter 5, verse 17, chapter 7, verse 9 and 40, chapter 9, verses 1 and 22, and 2 Chronicles 12:15. It makes reference to genealogical records kept by tribes or towns. So they had access to the records. And next time when we talk about Ezra and Nehemiah, we'll notice in Ezra and Nehemiah there's a real focus on these genealogical records, trying to figure out who are the Levites. Do you have a tribal lineage that we can get out of the records? And who are those who are the sons of David? And do we have tribal records for that? Then another one would be letters and official documents. 1 Chronicles 28. Verse 11 and 12. Then David gave his son Solomon the plans for the portico, the temple, its buildings, etc., etc. So he gave him something written down. Another one would be 2 Chronicles 32, verse 17. The king also wrote letters insulting the Lord, the God of Israel, and saying against him, just as the gods of the people of the land did not rescue their people from my hand, so the God of Hezekiah will not rescue his people from my hand. So there's official documents that they have access to. Another one would be poems, prayers, songs, and speeches. 1 Chronicles 16, verses 8 through 36. 1 Chronicles 29, verses 10 to 22. 1 Chronicles 16. The Psalm. The Psalms that David had written, and there are a few of them going through Chronicles. Another one will be 2 Chronicles 29, verse 30, and chapter 35, verse 25. Then they had access to other histories that had been penned. 2 Chronicles 27, 7, 36, 8. Did I write that down? 27, 7, or 1 Chronicles 27, 7. No, second, yeah. And then they had prophetic writings. 1 Chronicles 29, 29. 2 Chronicles 9, 29. And then you get the rest of these when I send you the PowerPoint. But the idea is that the chronicler had access to information. He had stuff that was written down that he could go back and check as he put all the stuff together.
Where was this stuff stored that he had access to?
Well, probably they carted it with them when they went into captivity. They just took it with them. I mean, it was just so important to them that there were some things they were going to keep their hands on. And then you have to remember there was writing that was going on between the captives and those who were still in the land. Jeremiah sending them letters, other people, there's correspondence going on, and so they have access. Just a lot of it isn't mentioned, but we know that there was some going on, so that there was, they knew what was going on back in the land. They were just entirely ignorant of what was happening back there. Okay, the purpose, the literary...
It's kind of interesting that in 28, where you were talking about David's plans for the temple, it says he gave him the plans of all that the Spirit had put in his
Right,
mind
I've got a note here.
for the courts. And I was saying, that's the definition of inspiration.
Right.
Yet we don't have that document. You know, we read this whole thing as though that happened, but we don't have the original.
Yeah. Okay, so the purpose, one is the literary history functions as a supplement to Samuel and Kings.
Do we have pens in here?
I think they'd be upstairs. In
In
the
box in the box.
big cabinet.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the literary history is a supplement to Samuel and Kings. The theological history has as its focus the priesthood and the Levites. Remember, when they go into captivity, the temple is destroyed totally. So now they no longer have a place for worship. And when they come back out of the captivity, they no longer have a king. And they don't have a place for worship. So now they're concerned about getting a temple up. And then they're concerned about establishing the Levites and the priestly line so that they can focus on it. When we go through the genealogies, the first 9 chapters, it starts out with Judah, which is the line of the king. Then it focuses on the Levites, and it also focuses on Benjamin. Remember, which were the 2 tribes that stayed faithful under Rehoboam?
Maybe.
Yeah, Benjamin and Judah.
Judah and Benjamin.
Yeah.
So it's going to focus on Judah and Benjamin, and the genealogies on the kings and the priests. And the interesting thing about that, in part, is that when the Essene community comes into existence, remember the Essene community is the community that would be like the Puritans during the English Reformation. The Puritans wanted to purify the church, and they wanted to get rid of all the Catholic accoutrements that they had. And they were really rigid. In fact, there was a group of them called the Separatists. And they were the ones that came over here to the Plymouth colony. And they decided they were going to wash their hands of trying to purify the church. They separated from the Puritans. They went to Holland and back to England and came over here. And the Essenes are just like them. Or they're just like the Essenes. The Essenes pull out of the Jewish community and go into the desert. And they're convinced it's soon, Messiah's arrival is very soon. So they want to prepare themselves for the arrival of Messiah. And they're persuaded that there will be 2 Messiahs. There'll be a Messiah king and Messiah priest. And they probably pick up this idea during this period of time, where there's a focus on the Levites and the temple and the worship and the kingly line. So that was one of the focuses that the Essenes had. In part of the theological history, the purpose is to demonstrate to these people who now no longer have a king, they're no longer a nation, that they still are the elect of God, and God has providentially guided them through all this period of time. And so the chronicler is just going back to he goes all the way back to Adam, and then lays out their history from Adam up to David in the kingdom and what had gone on, and that God had preserved them during that time. God had fulfilled his promise to David and gave David a huge kingdom and rest, and then did the same thing with Solomon during the initial reign of Solomon. So he's just trying to focus the people on the fact that God's hand is still on us. We don't know when it's all going to come to pass, but God is still involved with us as a people. And so we have a particular focus. But now there are subject people. He wants them to understand that the judgment that came upon them was because of covenantal infidelity. They weren't faithful to the covenant. And you pick that up a number of times when you go through the text. And correspondingly, their success as a people will be because of covenantal fidelity. And covenantal fidelity is going to come about by submission to the priests, by submission to the Levites, and by submission to Torah. God has given them his word. Now, remember during the same time, we talked about this last time, that the Samaritan religion is now beginning to carry real weight, and the Persian religion is carrying real weight. So now they've got these competing religions there, and the Levites and all of them are concerned to focus these people on God and his word and this order that he gave them, and then when we'll get this temple up. Okay. And so he wants them to understand that they're still a holy people. And by holy, the focus is that they're still special, they're still separate.
What again is the time difference between the writing of Samuel and Kings and the writing of Chronicles? How many years?
Samuel and Kings is probably written before the return.
Right.
Return is in probably 538, somewhere in that time frame. So before that, around 550, 560, Kings are written. Samuel was written before then.
Right.
And we have the Kings, and then we go into exile. They come back from the exile. A significant period of time has transpired after the exile, and then the chronicler begins to put this together.
How many years?
They came back in probably, I think the first group came back around, oh dear, in the 530s. And then when we get into Ezra and Nehemiah, we'll see that Ezra and Nehemiah start coming back in the 450s, 460s.
So it's a good amount of time.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the perspective, I'm just getting at the perspective of the people at the time Chronicles was written would have been more positive than the people at the time Kings was
Kings were
written.
written, oh yeah, right, yeah.
I mean, that's a happier
Mhm,
time, if you will. Than,
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's a happier time in that they're back, but it's a time when they're beginning probably to lose hope because nothing has happened. I mean, it's just, Messiah hasn't come back. If Zechariah has prophesied, and Zechariah prophesies about Messiah coming back, and there being the significant people, and that hasn't come to pass, you're going to start losing hope. And then to realize that after this, you're going to go another 400 years. Oh boy. Okay, so in Kings, the narrative is addressing the question, what happened to us? And so we get that out of the Kings. In Chronicles, the question is, now what? This is what happened to us, now what's going to happen? Didn't God make a promise to David, but we don't have a king? And it's interesting, when you read the Chronicles, in only, I think I've found 4 places, is David ever referred to as King David. All the rest of the time he just called David. David, 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 David. In a couple places, it'll say something about King David wrote or King David handed this on. They would naturally be concerned about the fact that they had been taught that they were the apple of God's eye, that they were God's special people, unique above all the peoples of the earth, and now here they are, subjugated people. Because there is nothing in the Chronicle that indicates any Greek influence, it's got to be well before Alexander starts his push around the empire. So it's before 350s, 340s. There are 2 prophecies in Zechariah chapter 8, verses 1 to 8 and 14, 9 to 21, which would have instilled hope in them, but nothing had happened. So Zechariah 8, 1 to 8, and then 14, 9 to 21. So the lessons for the remnant, the retrospective lesson is that covenant infidelity is what cost them all this heartache. Prospective lesson is that God made a promise to David, and God will be true to his word. And the promise was to David as his son, and that David would have a son ultimately on the throne. And so now their responsibility is to be covenantally faithful. And then introspectively, just the reality, if the leadership, the priests or whatever, could help them understand that God was still involved in their lives, the idea of Emmanuel, God is with us. It makes you wonder, because there's nothing in the text, but what was the reaction of the exilic community when Cyrus becomes the emperor, the king? And would they have remembered Isaiah's prophecy about Cyrus? That God was going to raise up one named Cyrus, and he named him, and who would be the one that would deliver them. Okay? And then another one would be...
What was the time frame from the prophecy of his name to when he actually...
Probably 3 or 400 years. Yeah, yeah. Well, the other one would be they're having received the letter from Jeremiah, in which Jeremiah exhorted them to, in a sense, relax, keep reproducing, build your families up, and you're going to be there for 70 years. And then Daniel figures it out, and Daniel starts his prayer after 70 years. And you wonder, what went on in the mind of the community? And when we next do Ezra and Nehemiah, we'll discover that only about 50,000 came back. Now, there was a huge number that went into captivity, and many of them stayed. They got so comfortable there, they just stayed. And only about 50,000 came back. So Jeremiah is Jeremiah 25, 11, and 12, and then Jeremiah 29, 10. And just think of the age of those who came back. I mean, my land, if there were some who were taken off, in their young teens and then come back in their 80s and 90s, and good night. Okay, the location of it in the canon, in the Septuagint and in our translations, Chronicles comes before Ezra. In the Hebrew canon, Chronicles is the last book. Second Chronicles is the last book. It comes after Ezra and Nehemiah, and then First and Second Chronicles. And do you remember the passage in Matthew I mentioned to you with respect to Second Chronicles? Remember when Jesus is talking to the guys on the Emmaus Road and says, beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded and all the scriptures distinct concerning himself. And then Jesus, just before he gives the Olivet Discourse, when he's chastising the religious leadership, he says, and you suckers have killed these prophets, starting with this guy to this guy. And he says, when you killed Abel, to Zechariah, son of Berechiah, behind the altar. And this guy, Zechariah, son of Berechiah, is mentioned in 2 Chronicles. He's the last prophet in the Chronicle that's mentioned. And he was the last prophet then in their historical record that had been killed. So Jesus, we're going to judge the city because you killed these prophets starting from this guy to this guy. And remember, Jesus had a couple of parables that he taught, where he, in the parable he says, and the owner of the vineyard sent his servants, and then he sent his servants, and then he sent his servants, and then he sent his son, and he killed the son. And when you go through reading the Old Testament record, as it pertains to the prophets, it always says, my servants, the prophets. My servants, the prophets. So when Jesus uses that little phrase, and the owner of the vineyard sent his servants, in the minds of the leadership, they immediately will think the prophet. Yeah. And it's, it's really apparent when you read through the Gospels and you're paying attention, and we'll point this out when we get there later, that the religious leadership began to realize that Jesus was talking about them, that he was pointing out them as being the problem. And that's why then they began to plot early on to kill him, get rid of him. Didn't like the pressure.
Now, where were you referring to in Matthew? Because I was looking at Matthew
23:35.
23:35.
Yeah. I think that was
Because I was looking at the Old Covenant, which was 17, and he's referring the Old Covenant.
Mm-hmm.
But it's,
And it's 23:35, and it's Second Chronicles. I think it's around 22. Let's see if I jotted that reference down on my margin. 22:35. Yeah.
23:35.
23:35. Yeah. Good. Thank you.
yes, yeah.
Okay, the outline of the Chronicles. Chapter 1 through 934, I title Royal Lineage. Chapter 1 Chronicles 1, chapter 9, 35 through 10:15, I titled Royal False Start. And that's the reference there is to Saul. And then 1 Chronicles 11, 1 through 2 Chronicles 9, 31, I titled that The Royal Reign, R-E-I-G-N. And then 2 Chronicles chapter 10, verse 1 through chapter 36, verse 21. 10:1 through 36:21. I titled that Royal Ruin. And then chapter 36, verses 22 and 23, I titled that Royal Return. All right. So the focus, the dynasty focuses on David's dynasty, although we have Saul for a brief period of time. And then we have that wicked queen, remember her name?
All I can think of is Jezebel. I know
That's
it's not her.
No, it's Rehoboam.
No, that's
Queen.
Queen. She bumped off all the kids except one?
except Josiah.
Athaliah. And she neglected. The nurse grabbed up Joash, the kid, and ran him off and hid him in the temple for 7 years, I think it was. Yeah. Okay, very little attention is given to the northern kings during this period of time. The focus is on the southern kingdom and God's special relationship with them. In chapter 22 to 29 in 1 Chronicles, the focus is on preparations for that temple. And then in 2 Chronicles chapters 1 to 7, the focus is on building that temple. So David, because he cannot build it himself but has this passion for it, then he ends up amassing all the materials so as to get ready to have it built. And then the first 7 chapters of 2 Chronicles, Solomon is going to build that thing. And David also then begins to make preparations for the Levites, in part because if they get a temple built, then they're no longer going to have to cart that stuff around. So then those 3 families within the tribe of Levi no longer have those little tasks to do. So that David begins to organize them into 24 orders. And if you remember when Luke starts his gospel out, he talks about, what was his name? Zechariah again? Yeah, his order comes up by lot, and then he's going to serve in the temple, and that's when the angel appears to him. And so then David organizes the singers and all these the gatekeepers and everything else. He just has a flair for getting it all ready.
What was that bit about him? I didn't understand him organizing prophets. It's right before the musicians, and it's like,
I missed that.
picks them. It's like he appoints them. It's like, how do you appoint a prophet?
20 gatekeepers, singers.
Maybe David knew their election.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, I assume you would have to.
Other officials.
Or maybe I'm thinking Solomon. It was prophets right before the musicians.
I've got singers. 24? Yeah. I don't remember that. But I miss a lot. One of my favorite verses is 1 Chronicles 26:18.
Yours. No.
Oh yeah, it's in King James, it sounds better. King James says that Parbar westward, 4 claws wind to a Parbar. I Oh dear. Maybe you'll find it later. Yep. Okay, key verses in 1 Chronicles chapter 2, verse 3, the prominence given to Judah. And we'll cross-reference that with Genesis chapter 49. Genesis 49 verse 10, where Jacob is blessing the sons before he dies. And in verse 10 he says, the scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he comes to whom it belongs, and the obedience of the nations is his. So it's a reference to the fact that the king is going to come out of Judah. Okay, 1 Chronicles 16, verses 25 and 26 is a cross-reference to Psalm 96, 4 and 5. It's a psalm just repeated there. 96, 4 and 5. Okay, 1 Chronicles 16, 32 is another one you'll see often referenced. Anybody has that?
Let the sea roar and all its fullness.
16, 32.
Let the sea resound and all that is in it.
I got the wrong reference.
Sea resounds, sea roars, sea screams.
Shout.
Shout.
I got the wrong reference. Oh, let's see. Oh, review. 1232.
Well, we're getting there. 1232.
Yeah, 1232. Gotta correct that. Men who had understanding of the times and knew what Israel ought to do. So oftentimes you'll see that admonition that we ought to be men and women who understand the times and know what needs to be done. Okay, then in 28:19, where David gets the pattern for the temple from God, and I think 28:19 says God wrote from the finger of God or the hand of God.
I have in writing as a result of the Lord's hand on me.
Yeah, okay, good. So he writes it down, and then the reference you mentioned about the Spirit of God giving it to him. Which it would be an interesting implication with respect to we see faint traces of ideas about the Trinity in the Old Testament writing. Here we have God giving it, and then the Spirit of God. Yeah.
What is the Hebrew word for spirit?
Ruach.
Ruach.
The temple was begun in roughly 966. And then somebody read 1 Chronicles 29 verses 11 to 13. And I would encourage you to memorize that little section.
11 to what?
11 to 13.
Yours, Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the majesty and the splendor, for everything in heaven and earth is yours. Yours, Lord, is the kingdom. Yours, you are exalted as head over all. Wealth and honor come from you. You are the ruler of all things, and in your hands are strength and power to exalt and give strength to all. Now, our God, we give you thanks and praise your glorious name.
Yeah. It's a good prayer. Focuses on the sovereignty of God, His providence. Okay, key verses in 2 Chronicles, chapter 1, verse 10, and chapter 7, verse 12. Again, it's just a record of Solomon's theophanies. And let's look at 2 Chronicles 7, verse 12. The Lord appeared to him at night and said, I have heard your prayer and have chosen this place for myself as a temple for sacrifices. When I shut up the heavens so that there is no rain, or command locusts to devour the land, or send a plague among my people, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and forgive their sin and will heal their land. Now my ears will be open and my eyes will be open and my ears attend to the prayers I've offered in this place. I have chosen and consecrated this temple so that my name may be there forever. My eyes and my ear and my heart will always be there. Again, here's another use of the word forever. It doesn't mean forever, eternal. It means for whenever I have to have a plan for it. It's the same word. It's olam. Olam is the word for forever, eternal, long period of time, whatever. As for you, if you walk before me as David your father did, and do all I command and observe my decrees and laws, I will establish your royal throne as I've covenanted with David your father, when I said you shall never fail to have a man to rule over Israel. But if you turn away and forsake the decrees, whatever. The question I had was, I wonder if by this time Solomon hasn't started to stray. And so in the second theophany, God says, if you do this, this is what I'm going to do. And if you do this, this is what I'm going to do. Because Solomon, within 20 years, is starting to go off track.
I have a question. How come we can take the liberty to read forever here, meaning not forever, and forever other places to mean forever and all eternity?
Context.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, if here he says forever,
Right.
and we know that in 586 he destroys the temple, then that temple, that particular building, wasn't forever, was up to that point in time.
It's not a little convenient.
It's reality.
Okay.
Or another one would be when Jonah's in the belly of the whale.
Yeah.
And Jonah prays, and I'm here forever.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And he was there forever in terms of however long God wanted him there. And then the whale spews him out, or whatever the fish was.
Okay.
Well, and again, it goes right back to we start from the end and look back toward the other way.
Yeah.
We start from the completed revelation and look back this way. And so the same thing would be here. At this point he's praying and he says forever, and then in 586 he destroys the place by the will of God. He destroys it. And so that forever was only for that period of time. Okay, chapter 2 Chronicles 6:36. Anybody know Romans 3:23?
For all sin, is that the one?
Yeah, right. For all sin fall short of the glory of God. So 6:36, 2 Chronicles 6:36 would be a cross reference, good cross reference for that. For there is no one who does not sin. And then another good cross reference would be Ecclesiastes 7:20. There is not a righteous man on earth who does what is right and never sins. So we've got a couple of references in the Old Testament in terms of all man is under sin. And then 1 Kings 8:46.
Nobody likes to hear this.
For there is no one who does not sin. When they sin against you, for there is no one who does not sin. So there are at least 4 verses we've got that point out that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Okay. How is 2 Chronicles 7:14 typically used today?
Can you say it again?
2 Chronicles 7:14, how is it typically used today? If my people who are called by my name.
Oh, it's used for us.
Oh, for election.
Yeah. People use it today thinking that if the whole believing community gets together and prays for something, that God's going to save the nation or whatever. And that ain't true, because he's only had one covenant in nation. Physical.
Yeah.
Ethnic.
America's
Right.
not his
Yep.
nation.
Yep. So we can't claim that kind of Promise.
Westboro Baptist disagrees with that.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
So all those needlepoint things gotta be thrown.
that's right. Oh dear. Well, another good one is 2 Chronicles 32 verse 8. Where Abshak is standing outside the gate and telling the Hebrews what he's going to do to them. How they're going to have to drink their own urine and all the rest.
Yeah, that's just gross.
And the leaders say, don't talk to the people in that language, so you'll talk to them in another language. And then somebody read 32 verse 8. If we got the right verse.
Second or first?
Second.
With him is only the arm of flesh, but with us is the Lord our God to help us and to fight our battles. And the people gained confidence from what Hezekiah the king of Judah said.
Good, good. So the people were trusting in the leadership. It says in King James says, and they rested themselves on the word of Hezekiah, king of Judah. Yeah. Okay, then 36, 22, and 23 are almost a verbatim for Ezra chapter 1, verses 1 to 3. 2 Chronicles 36, 22, and 23 are almost verbatim for Ezra 1, verses 2 and 3.
Other side of the page?
Yep, here you go. And then another little interesting thing. You got that one down. Go to 2 Chronicles 1:1. Solomon, son of David, established himself firmly over his kingdom, for the Lord his God was with him and made him exceedingly great. And then the words from Cyrus. Verse 36:23, this is what Cyrus, king of Persia, says, the Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has appointed me to build a temple for him at Jerusalem and Judah. Any one of his people among you, may the Lord his God be with him, and let him go up. The same little phrase, God be with him. Yeah, Emmanuel. But you think, whether it's Cyrus or it was Nebuchadnezzar when he lost his mind and then came to his senses, whatever, and the thought that hit you that here's this God, the one who's created the universe and all, and he's commanded me to do this. You think, man, what else is going on in the mind of that guy?
First Chronicles 25.
25?
Yeah, which one?
25.
First Chronicles 25.
Yeah, it's about the prophet.
For the ministry of prophesying,
Oh,
accompanied by harps, lyres, and cymbals.
yeah. Yeah, I wonder there if it might be just teaching, but I'll check that out. I never noted that, so piqued my curiosity.
It says down here that the priest also appears to function as a prophet.
Uh-huh.
James 1 says
Yeah.
he that prophesied under the authority of king.
Yeah.
In Chronicles, not only do priests prophesy, but kings function as priests.
I just never thought king appointing prophets.
Right, yep. No, I'll check that out. Get an answer on that. Okay, ooh. Okay, key chapters in First Chronicles would be 8 with the genealogy of Benjamin, just because Saul comes out of Benjamin. And then First Chronicles 10, where it gives us Saul's death. And then let's look at First Chronicles 10, verse 14.
Who killed Saul?
Yep.
Verse 4.
14.
And 4.
Oh, is it 4 got too? Yeah.
Well, no, 4,
Yeah, oh, yeah,
4
right.
says
Yeah.
Saul took his own
Right.
sword and fell on it.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. And then verse 14. So the Lord put him to death. So again, we see just another good relationship of man's involvement and God's involvement.
Well, if you're going to go there, I've got a verse for you.
Okay.
Is suicide sin?
It's stoning
Yeah.
sin.
Yeah.
Lamentations,
Right.
like 33.
Which Lamentations? There are
Oh,
five.
chapter, I'm sorry, chapter 3, chapter 3,
333?
33. We're talking about God does not willingly bring affliction or grief to the children of men.
Oh, I see. Oh, yeah, right.
Don't look down below.
I know. I got that
Don't look
memorized.
down below there. Just focus on that one verse.
I'll go to 37:38. Who is he that said, "Come to pass when the Lord commanded them not"?
I know.
Oh, yeah, I know.
But I was so excited when I read it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God, and then I read farther and I was like,
Oh, it's funny.
No, it's not at 10:30 at night.
you're a good boy, God.
Did you wake him up, tell him?
Yeah, we're talking about it.
Wait a minute again. He was trying to watch
Wait a
the
minute.
show.
Oh, boy. Okay, where were we? Oh, we did that.
Suicide sin.
No, actually, yeah. Self-murder.
Causes him to sin.
Yeah. Right.
You just want to torment me every time. I'm like, how can I come into the well, it's nice. What have I done to you?
You don't have to have it better.
Okay, Second Chronicles.
Exactly.
Oh, let's review. Where is the Davidic covenant in Samuel? Key chapter in Samuel would be the covenant with David. Another review. Where is the Hall of Faith in the New Testament?
Back in. No, you get us with that one last
I know.
Yeah.
Been out of shape. You don't know this?
Yes.
People on you.
You don't know who Chesty Fuller was?
We're just don't know better.
You know, I'm just saying you better pray for a long life for me if you want your last words to
Yes.
say to me
True.
to be, effective.
Oh, but
Okay, I'll
where
quote
are
the verse
you?
and then you tell me where it is. Now, faith is a substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen.
Oh, to tell you the truth, I thought that was your verse.
It is.
Oh, okay. Oh, good.
But without faith it is impossible to please him. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he's a rewarder of them that diligently seek him.
No.
Hebrews
I knew it was Paul.
chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11. My point is just that there's some chapters you ought to know. And just when someone makes a comment, your mind goes to that chapter.
No, you get these on.
Okay, where's the 11th chapter?
Oh, yeah, okay, that's
That's Psalm.
Corinthians, 1 Corinthians.
1 Corinthians what?
I don't know.
He's nasty.
You're just again, I know where you get it from.
Okay, 1 Corinthians 13 is the love chapter. Hebrews 11 is the faith chapter. By faith, by faith, by faith. We go through the whole roll call there.
Make a little
But I'm sorry, Mr.
Spreadsheet. Yeah, right.
1 Corinthians 13.
13.
It's the love chapter, but what's the faith one? That's the faith
Hebrews
one.
11.
Hebrews 11.
Hebrews 11, I'm sorry.
So the Davidic covenant is in 2 Samuel 7.
And you're going to ask us again, not like 2 weeks from now, right?
Yes.
And then it's repeated in Chronicles 17. 1 Chronicles 17.
When you ask what point it starts, you can
Oh,
write the
sorry.
thing.
I'm sorry, I'm a little bit dyslexic, so the numbers are hard for me sometimes. I'm like, what was that number?
Thanks, Aaron. How much longer did the southern kingdom last compared with the northern kingdom?
Long.
And why?
They had a couple of more faithful kings.
Good. Very good. there were some good kings in the south compared to those in the north. Remember, there was no good king in the
No
north.
good kings in the north, yeah.
But there were some good ones in the south, and as a result of those good ones and the reformations they brought about, there was a period of time extended for the southern kingdom. So the southern kingdom was 140 years roughly, longer. Yeah.
From like 721 to 580 something.
Mm-hmm.
80,
722 to 586. And those who led the reformations, I'll give you their names. It's Asa, 2 Chronicles 14 and 15. And he leads a significant reform, and then he turns bad. And he gets upset with God. And so God zaps him in the feet. He's diseased in the feet. And then in chapter 17 to 20 is Jehoshaphat. And he does extremely well. And then he follows up.
Hey, you're doing that study for us, right?
Yeah. One of the passages on Jehoshaphat, he gets involved with Ahab. And the prophet says to Jehoshaphat, "Shouldst thou help the ungodly and love them that hate the Lord?" And a lot of times that's what you end up seeing. The saints get involved with those who hate God. And they're involved with them. Got no business being involved with them. Okay, and then the next one would be Joash. 2 Chronicles 23, verse 16 through 24, verse 16. And Joash starts out extremely well. And he does well so long as he's under the tutelage of Jehoiada the priest. And then as soon as Jehoiada dies, then Joash turns to worms. So we have Asa, Jehoshaphat, Joash, and then we have Hezekiah. And there's a significant reform under Hezekiah. And he only gets 3 verses in the Kings, and he gets 3 chapters in the Chronicles. So chapters 29 to 32 are Hezekiah. And then remember the name of his son that turned bad? Mm-hmm. So that's what the name. Manasseh. And he reigns the longest of all of them. He reigns 55 years.
I thought he was really good.
He was? Yeah. And that would be another good issue or illustration of the long suffering of God. And he's taken, remember I told you last time, he was taken into captivity to Babylon while it was still under the Assyrian Empire. And then repents and comes back. Yeah. And then the last reform is under Josiah, chapters 34 and 35 of 2 Chronicles. And what's interesting with all of them, you think the Levites weren't doing their job, because remember one of the responsibilities of the Levites was to teach the people. But the people are getting progressively more ignorant with every generation that passes. The kings are getting ignorant in terms of the law, such that when they find the book of the law, Josiah doesn't even know what it is. And Josiah has to send somebody for Huldah the prophetess to tell him what this thing is. And yet if you remember, when Moses preaches his sermons on the east side of Jordan before they cross over, what was one of the things he said that every king had an obligation to do? Write out the book of the law. But here, by the time of Josiah, they are so far from it. So he has to send to Huldah the prophetess to figure out what in the blue blazes is this thing.
Which southern king is in when the north is gone?
When the north leaves,
You know what I'm saying? When
when the north goes off, who's the king? Let me just double check. Jehoram?
I mean, you said Manasseh was carried off. Is that the same?
No, that Manasseh's carried off. Well, the northern kingdom is already gone.
Okay.
Who's the last king of the north? It's not Ahab, is it?
No, Hoshea. But who is he's a Hoshea? Hoshea. It must have been Jotham. Uzziah's son.
So then from Ahaz on down, there's no
Right.
northern king.
No northern king.
What are you looking at?
Okay, I think I may have mentioned this the last time. How's that for you?
They're rocking out over there.
Yeah, rocks.
Okay, Chronicles is to John's Gospel as Samuel and Kings are to the Synoptics. Is to John's Gospel as Samuel and Kings are to the Synoptics. John will mention some of the same things that the Synoptics mentioned, but John gives more interpretive information with respect to them. Interestingly, David parallels Moses in that David desires to build a temple and can't. Moses desires to go into the land and can't. Samuel parallels Joshua, just as Moses said to Joshua, be strong. David says to Solomon, be strong. And I'll give you the references when you get the PowerPoint. Just as Moses says to Joshua, the Lord be with you. David says the same thing to Solomon. And then just as Moses said to Joshua, the Lord will never leave you, David says the same thing to Solomon. Okay, comparison of the covenant, the Davidic covenant. In 2 Samuel 7:16, God says to David, and thine house and thy kingdom shall be established forever before thee. Thy throne shall be established forever. Now when mention is made of it in the Chronicle, the chronicler says, in his recording of it, 1 Chronicles 17:13, I will be his father, and he shall be my son. And I will not take my mercy away from him as I took it from him that was before thee. But I will settle him in mine house and in my kingdom forever, and his throne shall be established forever. So the focus changes from David's house to God's house. David's kingdom to God's kingdom. So and again, the chronicler is trying to focus the people's attention on the fact that the promise was to David, not just as the king, but David as his son. And that ultimately he would have a son on that throne. And then that comes to pass when Zechariah is given the statement by the angel in the temple that day. He will give him the throne of his father David. Okay. One of the things we see when we read through the Chronicles, or even through the Kings, is the religion becomes just so ritualized or formalized, and there's no heart in it. Because often it'll say, and he, followed in the footsteps of David, but not with a whole heart. And so the people just don't have a heart for it. And then they just keep continuing to decline. And we see the decline in all of them. I mean, from even those who were the best, they just progressively decline, get worse and worse and worse. mean, it got so bad. I mean, Manasseh's putting foreign altars in the temple. When Joash cleaned it, no, when Hezekiah cleaned the temple up, took 16 days to carry all the crap. So the thing got so messed up, so fouled up. You know.
That doo-doo again.
That's right. Okay. Couple more things. Yeah. Kings focuses on the throne. Chronicles focuses on the temple and on the priesthood. I came up with another outline for 2 Chronicles. Just dedication of the temple, desecration of the temple, destruction of the temple. And that's what you see when you read Chronicles. An unbelievable prayer in Solomon's part in dedicating the temple. And then God comes down and fills it with His glory such that they can't do anything. And then they just begin to go astray. They desecrate it. Lessons I pulled out of that. God possesses what's dedicated to Him and manifests Himself. Glory came down and filled the temple. How would that be? What would be a parallel to that in the New Covenant era? How does God manifest Himself in that which is dedicated to Him?
Well, Pentecost,
Okay, that'd be one. Yeah. But how about individually, personally?
right? In the person
when
of
you-
Jesus? Oh, go ahead, sorry.
When you the gift of the Holy Spirit.
Okay. But how is that gift of the Holy Spirit manifested? What's the first act of dedication on the part of the believer? Conscious dedication. What's the first, after the work of faith?
Oh, you get that.
Baptized. Yeah.
So in a sense, that's what baptism is. Public dedication. That I'm identified with Christ. It's public identification. Now, how does God manifest Himself in that temple? How does one know that the Spirit of God is there?
In us?
Yeah.
By our fruit. I mean, you
There
can't
you
handle
go.
that.
That's it. See? He manifests Himself in that which He possesses. How do we desecrate that temple?
Sin.
Okay? Sin in what sense?
Disobedience.
Okay, disobedience?
Rotten.
Rotten fruit, good, very good. Rotten fruit. Two ways would be getting caught up in false teaching or getting caught up in formalism. Going through the motions in no heart. Yeah. Putting on the clothes, but there's nothing inside. And then just as God had the prerogative to destroy that temple, He has the prerogative to destroy the temple of the New Covenant. And where do we establish that? In the New Covenant writings.
Going to hell.
Well, even before that. Because the believer ain't going to go to hell.
No.
But God can destroy the temple, and where do we see that established in the New Covenant writings?
Oh, with the couple, right, that lied about their...
Yeah, Ananias and Sapphira.
Nice. Right.
We assume that. Where's another place? We ought to be reminded of it every Sunday, and we're not. In this church? Huh? Communion?
Oh, all right, say the whole meeting.
Where in the New Covenant literature does God let us know that He has the prerogative of destroying the temple?
Oh, because Jesus said, to this temple will be destroyed.
Well, but no,
No, I'm
us being the temple. Oh, come on, go to 1 Corinthians 11.
I'm already dead.
1 Corinthians chapter 11. Well, see, and the point is that you probably haven't heard it enough.
Are you talking about if we come to communion without the right attitude, that we can be punished for that?
It's just listen.
Okay. I'm still getting it.
For I received from the Lord that what I also passed on to you. The Lord Jesus, on the night He was betrayed, took bread, and when He had given thanks, He broke it and said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me. In the same way, after the supper, he took the cup, saying, This cup is a new covenant in my blood. Do this whenever you drink it in remembrance of me. For whenever you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. Therefore, whoever eats the bread or drinks the cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner will be guilty of sinning against the body and blood of the Lord. A man ought to examine himself before he eats the bread and drinks the cup. For anyone who eats and drinks without recognizing the body of the Lord eats and drinks judgment on himself. That is why many among you are weak and sick, and a number of you have fallen asleep.
Oh my gosh, don't you think we should like mention that to somebody?
Brian did say that a couple months ago.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
He must have been teaching that
What?
Sunday.
It should be like my church, they only serve communion once a year.
Well, I mean, we're supposed to do, I mean, I get that we're, but I just, you
Well,
know, I think that
he
we
was
gotta
talking
be
about-
more formal about that.
Well, we didn't go into actually being sin. He was talking about
What's
people
the deal?
talking and stuff.
Right,
During
yeah.
not being in the right frame of mind.
Oh, see, I must have been
He
teaching
didn't go.
that Sunday.
He didn't go in depth about people.
The point is that, you know,
That really much
that we ought to be admonished, as Paul says, to examine ourselves because we're subject to judgment. Yeah, but we've just got so far from that.
I was just thinking about the difference in punishment for David's sin of adultery versus his sin of numbering
Yeah,
the troops.
yeah.
And we think, you know, adultery was violating one of the Ten Commandments, but I mean, I guess it's a little bit closer, more formal, the issue of numbering.
Yeah. Well, but remember, when he committed adultery, he got punished.
Right.
When he numbered the people, they got punished.
Right. Well, he had the option.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Right.
oh yeah.
And was that one was an act of one person, a man, one was an act of a king? Is that why the people were punished instead?
Probably.
Well, I mean, even him being punished, it was just one death
Oh, yeah.
versus 70,000
Oh yeah,
deaths.
oh
you
yeah.
know? I mean,
yeah. Of course, remember again when he got punished, it wasn't just the death of his son; it was the three
And
sons,
John
right.
was-
Right.
And then lost
with
the
his
kingdom,
women
yeah.
and- right, all that.
All right, we'll close with that. Any questions?
You're right.
That's a joke, right?
Well, I hope now at least it's helping you to just begin to set things in context when you come to the text. You know, just where do they fit? How do they fit? That sort of thing. Yeah. Organized.
you mentioned the temple becoming a permanent fixture versus what they were carrying around before. But I mean, the temple seems like all the pieces were like magnitudes in size larger than what they were carrying around.
Oh yeah, in terms of temple, yeah.
Right. I mean, it's like,
Oh yeah. And scholars say that the temple that David built was nowhere near the extent of the one that Herod ended up building. Remember, it says that 46 years they've been building that thing. So Solomon spent 7 years building his, and then later on, that thing was just humongous. And apparently it really was just an unbelievably glorious edifice. They say that when you came from the east, walking toward the temple down the Mount of Olives, and the sun crested over the hill, that when it would shine off of the gold from the temple, that it would be blinding, and just blinding light coming off the thing. Yeah, it was just unbelievable.
it's like that Mormon one on the loop around DC.
Yeah.
The north.
Right.
So,
Going by that when
Yeah.
the sun shines on that.
That
Oh,
place,
well.
you should see the.
Have you been inside it?
You know, my parents got married in there.
Is that right?
Freaky
The
experience.
second time, you know,
Wow.
when they were
It was
born.
very, very bizarre. And I've baptized for people that were dead in there.
Yeah.
In big bowls, right?
No, so that would give them a celestial marriage if they're buried
Yes.
in the temple.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, not anymore.
How does that work? How does that work? Oh. Have you ever read about the guerrilla warfare that the Mormons carried out against the U.S.
Yes,
Army? And they
yes.
won. Oh yeah.
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 That was
Was that
strange part of
Sheridan?
history. Strange part of history.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really fascinating. Okay, do you remember which king?
It was funny.
went into the temple to make an offering and God gave him leprosy? The rest of his life he had leprosy, died a leper.
That's the disaster. Yeah, wait a minute.
There's two different names. He's in one place his name starts with an A, and then there's a place he'll start with a U. Uzziah?
Uzziah. I remember Uzziah. I
Yeah.
don't remember him. Oh, Uzziah the leper.
That's right. See, remember he went in there and he took the censer within the temple, transgressed, and boy, God zapped him right away. So from that point on, then, he's still king, but his son Jotham is reigning, so Jotham is a co-regent with him. So a lot of times we'll see Jotham being mentioned, but Uzziah is still alive, but he spends the rest of his life a leper. Had to live away. They had to live outside the camp. Yeah. One of the comments about Uzziah, God said, when you were little in your own sight, and then you got proud. And you'll see that just a number of times in the text. When thou wast little in thine own sight. Yeah.
Did you see House?
No, not yet. I'm going to watch it when I get home tonight. Is that right? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, dear.
The good kind, the good leprosy. I didn't realize there was a good one.
Pretty.
Oh, the pretty.
Oh, is that right? I didn't know. Oh,
It's pretty leprosy.
How is it pretty leprosy?
Because it makes you look 10 years younger.
Yeah,
This girl that was in the hospital was 37, but she looked 27. Yeah.
makes your skin.
is that right? Huh.
Did they sell it to the cosmetic companies?
Well, it's got some side effects to it.
It only works for a week and then your face falls off.
Did you see the studies about women who are willing to give up 10 years of their lives to be thinner or prettier? Oh my goodness. Every generation now, for like the last few generations, they survey them, and women are willing to be able to be their perfect body weight that they think. They're willing to give up 10 years of their lives.
Nice. How waxed out we can get, huh? Good. Well, Ryan, why don't you pray for us, please?
Very well. Father God, we're just so thankful we could come here tonight as a community of individuals that are looking to reestablish, reconnect, and build and strengthen our relationship with you, and spend time in your word and follow the instructions you left behind for us. We thank you for that. Thank you for the community of friends here. And help us to encourage in our knowing, and encourage us in our being, and propel us in our doing, that we can be manifestations of that fruit. Please take us all home safely. But also please be with our world right now. We're in really tough times, country and global financial, those that are fighting for our freedoms that we are so blessed to enjoy. We offer this to you in your Son's name. Amen.
Thank you.